Welcome to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Well, have you seen any pictures of Hillary Clinton these days? She's all bundled up. She's all covered up. She was at a Memorial Day parade, and she appeared in a summery overcoat and a scarf. But then if you looked at the back, her shoulders and neckline, it looked like she was wearing some kind of sort of heavy brace. And so we all wonder, is there a medical issue here? We'll talk about that on the program. Plus, there's a very interesting endeavor that an entrepreneur is doing in Texas that I'll bring this story to the air for you. There is a man who has opened up an ice cream store for the purpose of only hiring special needs adults. He is a fascinating guy. People magazine did a whole expose on him, and I'll have him on the program. Plus, first up, we're going to talk about the baker, the win with the Supreme Court and the baker. So, welcome to Think America with Terry Gilberg. This is America's Town Hall, where I bring real people in, non-broadcasters that is, we're all real people, to run down the hot topics of the day, thought-provoking conversation starters, and we're ready to roll here. So we have Jim. Jim is a tax consultant, and my notes say he's also a pianist that does musical theater. He's a for-hire pianist in musical theater on the weekends. Well, that's diverse. Left brain, right brain, or is that all just right brain? I forget.
It's all one brain, Terry.
I forget. It sounds like you can do math real quickly, and you can also jiggle the IVs. So welcome to the program. Chuck is here. Chuck is a recruiter for the United States Air Force. Well, that's interesting, too. Nice to have you, Chuck.
Glad to be here.
All right, let's get right to it, guys. Here's the hot topics of the day. The baker has won. The Supreme Court this week sided with the baker who turned away a gay couple's request, citing religious freedom in not wanting to bake them a cake for a wedding. Now, a lot of the mainstream media, in case you didn't know or hadn't really noticed, it's a near win. 7-2 decision is not a near win. I always thought this was pretty straightforward and kind of a no-brainer. The guy has a right to his shop, right to his belief. It's First Amendment. But anyway, it ran up the totem pole all the way to the Supremes and the Colorado baker. It was decided that he was correct in saying no to the gay couple. The Supreme Court said he had the legal right to refuse to make a wedding cake for the gay couple because of his religious objections to same-sex marriage. All right. What's interesting about this, and by the way, I happen to agree with the baker. I never thought that this was a difficult, go to another shop, right? I never thought this was, so complicated with civil rights and all of this. And at the time, a lot of the gay community was citing all this civil rights. And, then we've got the Supreme Court that said it's okay, it's legal now to be married if you're a homosexual couple. But it got all bollocksed up in a lot of activism. Jim, I'll go to you first. How do you see it? Were the Supremes correct?
Yeah, they were. Now, keep in mind, the government has a real record and history of hostility towards people of faith. And we saw that in the state of Colorado. This is why it got to the Supreme Court, is because for whatever reason, people of faith constantly are under attack by government. And why in the world would they work so hard to protect the rights of one group and not another? I don't understand, because as you said, this was very simple. Now, if I were that baker as a person of faith and someone who does not agree with gay marriage, if I had a couple come in and wanted me to bake a cake, I would have made that cake. I would have made that money, and I would never feel like I was in somehow turning away from my faith or my personal beliefs in order to help him. But that's not what this guy chose to do. Here's my point. It doesn't matter. If I go to Taco Bell and I think that guy's mad at me behind the counter, I'm going to leave, because that's the last guy on earth I want making my taco. Am I right? So as a baker, why, or as a patron, why would you want a baker who is not in support of what you're doing? This is a really simple decision. The free market can decide. If he does not want to bake you a cake, go somewhere else. Someone else will make it.
They went to him, Jim, because he has a company called Masterpiece.
Right.
He's quite artistic. And his hang-up was that if you want me to give you a plain, old, white, sugary cake, just the cake, here. I do make those. It's not against my belief system here. But that's not what they were asking. They wanted his artistry for a gay wedding, not the wedding itself. The wedding itself was not in Colorado, but the reception was going to be in Colorado. And that may have meant, they didn't get that far, but it could have meant rainbow colors, a little plastic, two men with tuxedos, a little plastic doll atop the cake, any other suggestion that it's gay, gay, gay. And he said, I don't use my artistry to celebrate that, and the decoration would be celebratory. Chuck.
You know, I can't answer your question about this issue any better than Jim just did, as far as I'm concerned. He hit every point nail on the head. And then you brought up a very perfect and very, very good point as well. You know, I would have told the guy, listen, I can't make a cake for you guys. I don't know how to make a cake for about a couple of gay fellows. Sorry, go someplace else. But these people, to take this all the way to the Supreme Court is just another clear example of individuals that are in the gay community in this particular case that are trying to get attention as far as I'm concerned. You know, shame on them. I'm like with Jim. You do whatever you want behind closed doors. You know, God's going to take care of it at the end of the day.
We see they're saying it's their civil rights. And if you're open for business, you are, this is what they would say, you are discriminating against me based on my orientation, and thou shalt not. That's why it went to the Supremes. Now, it does mean with this decision that businesses may have a broader platform to run their day-to-day operations, which never should have, in my opinion, come into question, because I'm with you guys on this. But it does set the stage for some other clashes, because even though they answered this clearly with 7-2, there will be some unanswered questions, most likely, for example, well, can I come along and say, I have deeply held religious beliefs, which may be a lie, but I can claim that, and therefore that is my door open for discrimination. So then at some point, the Supremes are going to have to define, perhaps anew in this country, what means religious belief. See, religion, I think loosely defined, is belief system. I might have a religion of being a tree hugger. I believe in Mother Nature. I'm going to go out every day and hug the tree. It doesn't necessarily mean Judeo-Christian, Buddhist, Islamic. I mean, it might not, Protestant. It doesn't necessarily mean that. So I think that in this case, it's pretty cut and dry. They made a ruling, and that's it. And 7-2 is pretty strong. But I think the door may be open for the other questions of how do you stop potential discrimination just because somebody says, well, I got a religious belief. Because then they're going, I suppose you can't.
You can't.
But there are other Supreme Court cases that they're looking at, the case of a florist, I'm told, which is similar to this. So how will they look at that? They'll probably have to look at the individual case and said, the florist believes XYZ.
Yeah.
And that, too, is a deeply religious belief.
Yeah, and when you read the argument that they wrote, that's really what I think they were trying to say, is in this case, they don't see that prejudice. They see a man who is and has a right to exercise his faith in the way that he sees fit. And they understood that as opposed to seeing it as a discriminatory factor. But I think that, you know, what you were just saying is right. In certain instances, you're going to look at something similar and you are going to see a clear prejudice. But that did not happen in this case. That is one of the reasons why they're referring to this and talking about this as something that is going to come up again in lower court rulings and is often referred to as not a real definitive court ruling. But, I mean, it's the Supreme Court, but the way that they wrote this, I think we're going to see this argument come up
And I always like when they write, Chuck, in the negative, they wrote that he is free not to bake a cake for a function he doesn't celebrate. In fact, he is free not to express at all. He's free not to bake a cake. He's free to shut the doors and not have anybody come into his shop. He's free to take a vacation from it all. So you could come in and want something else, and he's free not to necessarily defer to what you want. In other words, it is freedom not to express as well as the must that you have to express.
Yes, absolutely. You know, at the end of the day, this guy did exactly what he needed to do as a business person for himself and for his ability to stay in business and be happy with what he is doing on a day-to-day basis. I've been in business as well. You know that I recruit these days, but if somebody, quite frankly, pisses me off and I don't want to do business with them, I don't do business with them. Now, they could call me a racist or call me whatever names that they want, but at the end of the day, it's my business. And I can choose and should have the ability to choose to do business with whoever the heck I want.
Terry, I'm bald as a cue ball. If I walk into a building and somebody goes, "Hey, we don't serve bald guys in here. You're way too handsome." It's like, a bucket of manure and you're setting a sapphire next to it. You make us all look bad because you're so incredibly good looking. We don't serve you. You've got to leave. We aren't going to have you. Get out. You know what? I'm going to leave. I'm going to find somewhere else to go, and I won't go back, and I'll tell other people about the experience I had walking in.
But the difference between both of your examples is one is behavior, and one is who you are as a person. When you talk about somebody that makes you mad and you want them to get the hell out of your shop, that's behavior. You, on the other hand, with your bald head like a cue ball, you didn't ask to be a
beautiful bald head.
And you're so handsome. You are who you are, and this is the argument they're saying. This is who we are, and I have a civil right.
Well, we have an argument that homosexuality is a choice. And so, we can go back and forth on all of those
However,
details.
That's a difficult argument for the Supremes when it was the Supreme Court that said gay marriage is now legal and constitutional. Yep. So that's a different argument.
Different argument.
But when you've got gay marriage now constitutional in the United States, no wonder some of these kinds of issues.
Do you know whether or not the two fellows who came in there to get the cake made were bald or had a lot of hair on their head?
I've seen pictures of them. They didn't have a lot of hair on their heads, but they're not bald.
Okay, well, he could have just said, listen, I don't make cakes for two dudes coming into my building and ordering a cake that have that much hair on their head. Would that have got him out of trouble?
I don't know. I'm not a Supreme Court justice sitting on the bench.
All right, I'm being silly.
What? No, it's fine. What it's coming down to is they're putting the trump card of their rights not to be discriminated against on the table. That's why it went up to the Supreme Court. And he's saying, I got a right too, and it's called First Amendment. In fact, I didn't read the decision, but I would imagine in the discourse about all of this, his right to freedom of expression, that's his speech right, and then his right to freedom of his religion.
You're correct.
So he's got the right not to express as well.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
And it was written that way. He's free not to bake the cake. We'll be right back. You're listening to Think America with Terry Gilberg. Reason first, then converse.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
So many people are asking whether or not Hillary Clinton has some neuromuscular thing going on, some joint issues going on. Lately, in many pictures of her that hits the web and a lot of the tabloid the sites too, there are pictures of Hillary quite covered up. In fact, oddly bundled up for a summary event. During a Memorial Day parade, she was in a overcoat. Now, it was a summary overcoat, but nonetheless. And she had a scarf, and it was very clear she was overdressed. When she gave a few keynote speeches at commencements, she's in cap and gown, so you wouldn't have noticed it. But then when she takes the gown off, she's got big, long, drapey scarves around her neck, and then they kind of drape back on her shoulders and her backside. What's going on? There are a few functions where these long draped scarves are sort of uniquely positioned on her shoulder and on her back. I think there's a back brace there. So that begs the question, did she fall? Is she healthy? Does she have a medical issue? We need to know this. She's a public figure. She's not done in politics. She always seems to be dusting it up again. So what do you think, Jim? What's going on?
Well, Hillary, if you can hear me, please please keep covering up. More and more layers. Scarf.
Over your head.
It's called hadid, whatever they call it. Wrap it up.
Hijab.
There you go.
A babushka.
All right, now, 2 years ago.
You don't care for her, do you?
I don't.
Huh.
She's a favorite target of mine, and she is a very large target. So, wrap up, Hillary. But I saw the pictures online. Now, if you look, a couple of the pictures that she has show what looks like a rectangular something sticking up under her shirt. It's pushing the shirt up on her back.
Under the jacket, yes,
2
like
years,
a brace.
Yes. 2 years back, I broke my back in 4 places. Now, when that happened, the doctors came in and custom fit a brace. The first thing they said is, you're way too good looking not to be walking, so we've got to put you in a brace. So they customized this brace, put me back together, had to wear it for months.
And you're so beefed up, too.
I know. Well, it looks exactly like that. I don't know what's under there, and I'm not even going to try to imagine it because I will vomit. But there is clearly...
Because you're good looking, but she, of course, isn't.
I'll leave that to the discretion of those who see the pictures. But when you see her back and that's sticking up in the back, that rectangular piece, that looks exactly like the brace that I wore and that would stick up on my back when I had broke my back. So I don't know what's down there, but it looks to me like she definitely has some kind of a brace.
It does look like a back brace.
It does.
I wonder how her... And yet she has fairly good posture in it. So you wonder if she slipped. You wonder if she, has a joint out of joint.
Yeah.
Something's off there.
Who wonders?
Well, I do. I do.
The Clintons are masters at diversion. Number one of the things that you asked was, do you care and why? And the bottom line is, I don't care. I don't think very many people care. Certainly people that don't care about Hillary don't care. Those that do, what difference does it make? The fact
what
matters.
difference does it
what
make?
What difference does it make? This is
Hillary.
When you say she's a master at deception, yes, of course. But would you go so far to say that what appears clearly to be a back brace and then
be a prop? Yeah.
Be a prop as a diversion on something else?
Oh, yeah, of course. Are you kidding me? You think Trump's not going to go along all the list of the things that he promised America that hired him to do what he said he was going to do, not do, and prosecute her for her crimes? You think that's not in the back of her head right now? Heck yeah, it is.
I think it is. There was a time when President Trump, for the first couple of months, people were going, oh, he won. Oh, thank God he won. I'll leave it alone. Nothing will ever happen.
Right.
It's over. At least she didn't win. Her punishment for all of these crimes is that she didn't win. Let it go.
She hasn't.
And I thought to myself, let it go. The nation needs its emotional equilibrium back. Justice needs to be, let what go? The server go? Benghazi? All of this stuff we're just going to let go?
Right.
Clinton cash with
That's what they're hoping.
With uranium? It ain't going to happen.
I hope not.
It's not happening.
And
it's not
we have had
happening.
news this week.
It's taken a long time to poop along, but it's not happening.
We have had news this week of people who have brought back the email discussion and seem willing to talk if they're granted specific legal immunities and other things. So perhaps they saw this coming and are preparing some type of a pity plea. It's certainly not beneath them, but who knows what the
Well, then on that thread, guys, what are we looking at?
Carrie,
6 months this summer by the end of the year? What do you think?
Great question. She's clearly, and as far as I'm concerned, absolutely not on Trump's top agenda of things to take care of as far as his promises goes. He's doing all the other things that are more important for making America great, more important for the American people, more important for everybody that lives in this great country. It's going to come. She knows it. She's just not a priority right now.
Well, it's come for Comey, for McCabe, even Loretta Lynch a bit. The Inspector General's report that's dripping out. These people are not, they're in the spotlight in a very negative way. All roads will lead back to her, the Anthony Weiner, Uba Abedin, and I believe ultimately to President Barack Obama.
Oh, yeah.
And this whole Iranian thing, it's just so thick and deep, and it's slow. The wheels of justice grind slowly. And I'm just waiting for some indictments through Jeff Sessions, who's MIA.
They'll come.
Drain the swamp.
You think they'll come?
They'll come.
I hope. I hope.
We don't want to flood the establishment right now in order to be able to do the things that they need to do while getting most of them out of the picture.
I think it will come. We are Think America, thinkamericaradio.com. Straight ahead, the business owner who decided to hire only special needs adults for his ice cream stores. Great story. Straight ahead.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
So when I read about a Texas business owner and entrepreneur that decided to open up ice cream stores for the purpose of hiring only special needs adults, I was very intrigued, and I thought, hats off to him. Bravo. He has opened up Howdy Homemade Ice Cream, and it caught the attention of not just this media show, but even People magazine. I want to introduce you now to Tom Landis. He says the special needs adults are far more reliable, unlike a lot of teens and people kind of spin out. They don't like really having to work at an ice cream parlor. Not so with special needs adults. They're friendly, they love being employed, and they love doing the simple tasks of scooping ice cream and greeting people. So welcome to Think America, Tom. Welcome to the program. Nice to have you, sir. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So you are to be commended. From what I know of this story, you went out and said special needs folks need to be hired. They're looking for work. In Texas alone, there's 240,000 special needs adults. And so you said, okay, what can they do? What would be friendly, welcoming for them? They're reliable and so forth. So you decided to open one, not just one, but and then more ice cream stores. Tell us about it.
Yeah, you know what? It's just phenomenal. I don't think we've ever seen a group of people, say, with Down syndrome that have advanced so far since the time, say, 1960s, the time of Gene Stallings, the legendary coach who had a son with Down syndrome, Johnny, who was born June 2nd, 1962. And he wrote a book, Another Season, about his son, but there was no opportunities back then. The lifespan was 5 to 6 years. Now the lifespan is 50, 60 years. Just what the advances that have come so far, and yet it hasn't reached into the employment segment yet at all. And that seems the biggest gap in America, anywhere. We want a sense of purpose. We want a job. We want to prove ourselves. And those with special needs, they're just, whether they're autistic, Down syndrome, it's the greatest unharnessed workforce in America, and it's just so exciting to see what they can do.
Well, how is business?
Business is phenomenal. You can look at things that, say, 30 years ago, 1 in maybe 15,000 were born on the autism spectrum. Today, it's 1 in 67, 1 in 68. So we have an entire army of people that are fired up and excited because they either have a child or a relative that they know is so capable, and yet they can't get past perhaps that interview. Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point, Blink, the great author, he says, in the first 10 seconds is determined whether you get a job. Someone perhaps is autistic that can't make that eye contact is going to strike out.
Yes.
And so we have about 70 people lined up to franchise.
Wow, that's wonderful. So, Tom, how did you personally come up with this idea? And tell us about your heart. Why special needs? Do you have a special needs family member? Where did you, along your life journey, have such an affection for special needs adults? Maybe special needs kids, and then you felt the adults would be better employees? Or tell me about that aspect.
Yeah, you know what is, I'd like to say none of this is just about me, but I would like to say that my mom was one of the last to get polio, and, one leg a lot shorter than the other. We grew up in D.C. She didn't drive. We took public transportation. She never complained once. Mm-hmm. And I think I've always rooted for the underdog. And I just have had an opportunity to have a lot of friends and people close to me that have a child with special needs, and it's impossible for me to look them in the eye and not say, okay, you know what, I will mortgage my house and I'll put my other 2 restaurants up as leverage to do this business. And it's paid off because it's proving to the world, not a warm and fuzzy, not a nonprofit, not a government, please throw more money at me, not a 5K, not a black tie deal. This is just a job for people with special needs. And people are so fired up about it. Customers love it. You know what? Here's the litmus test of it.
Yeah.
Our restaurants have 5-star reviews on Yelp, and that isn't because I am good at customer service. It's because my employees are awesome at customer service.
I believe you. And I think you were quoted to say, look, this is a business deal. I'm a for-profit kind of guy, and these are the best kind of employees to ever have. They're very friendly. They're hardworking. They love the simple tasks like scooping ice cream and just merely meeting people and greeting them. Whereas if you might hire a teenager, they might get, I got a date. I got to get out of here. They're antsy. They might not be as reliable. So from a sheer business point of view, you wanted the best employee, so I read in the notes, and that was the special needs adult.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, what is fascinating is originally I thought the front of the house, the greeters, the scoopers, would be those with Down syndrome. In the back of the house, for culinary consistency, it would be those more on the autism spectrum. And it has just been phenomenal to see people break out of their quote-unquote autistic shells and their personalities bloom because we see our employees going much further. One employee we absolutely think will be Major League Baseball's first announcer on the autism spectrum. Why? Because his knowledge and ability to memorize and communicate baseball stats is unparalleled. It's unmarked, and it also is a very distinct autistic voice. But I think that's what baseball needs is another Harry Carey, another Bob Dylan, another distinct voice that stands out.
I think it's terrific. Now, do you have to screen in any way for special needs folks that are rather high functioning? Because this is all a spectrum. We already know that. I'm sure this audience knows that. Or if someone's listening in Texas, and I know you've got a shop also in Salt Lake City, and they want to apply, and maybe they're not very high functioning, would they be turned away, or would there be something for them in your shops?
You know, one of the things that I love the most is that we've really surrounded ourselves with people that and honestly, when I say, gosh, I'm not sure I see a spot here, that they'll say, well, let's work with them, and let's see what we can do. And we have a capacity of where we can hire, but one example is we had someone come in that was blind and had a seeing eye dog and wanted to work in the ice cream shop. And my first thought was somewhat, logically was, well, that's just not going to be a good fit. Uh-huh. And then one of my employees says, no, you know what, how great would it be if we could be the eyes for them? And that kind of thought process. It's fascinating because it takes you out of the box of where most thought is, including most business thought. I walked in the other day into my restaurant, and one of my employees that was the shift manager at the time decided the most appropriate thing for him to do was to bring in and set up his entire drum set. And
okay.
my first thought was, anger, frustration. This isn't part of the checklist. This isn't part of how we do things.
All right.
And I mentioned this is going to be kind of loud. Wouldn't this be loud in a very small 1,000-square-foot restaurant? And he said, no, look, and he had dampers on all the drums. And I said, well, it could get sticky. And he said, I don't care. And the next family came in. I was I was feeling kind of awkward, and the kids immediately started playing on the drums. And he, at that moment, was the embodiment of hospitality, and I, at that moment, was learning.
Tom, I'm sure you have some problems along the way. No business runs perfectly. Do you encounter a bias, prejudice, discrimination from some customers, mocking, Anything like that? Do people say, we're not going to go there because they've got the you-know-what types working there? Tell me a little bit about that or other problems you may have incurred as a result of hiring only special needs adults in your stores.
Yeah, you know what is I definitely I tell you what is I'm the only one it really bothers. I think my employees, they've dealt with it their whole life, and
so it's not an issue. It's not.
And so, in fact, the opposite is really true. Is that I've owned restaurants for 20 some years, and if you stand behind the counter of a restaurant, you really see the worst in people a lot of times. They do not treat you with respect when you're behind the counter. The interaction of customers, one thing I wasn't prepared for was the number of people that will come in and start crying because they have a family member with a disability in another city, and there's no opportunity and no hope, or they wish that when their family was alive, there was something. And
Understood.
So,
and I'm so glad People Magazine did a spread on you. Thank you very much for being on the program. Appreciate you. God bless you. And keep scooping.
God bless you.
Tom Landis, Texas business owner, entrepreneur, hiring only special needs adults for his ice cream stores. I'm Terry Gilberg. Think America. Reason first, then converse.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Tom Landis and his ice cream shop are out there in Texas. They also have stores in Salt Lake City. In Texas, by the way, they're in Dallas. And again, I give him a big hug and a handshake across the miles. Howdy Homemade Ice Cream Shops for what he is doing in helping employ special needs. What'd you think, Chuck?
Oh, man, I actually love what he's doing over there. As a matter of fact, as I read this story and you were talking to him, it reminded me of a couple of guys that work at the Safeway nearby my house picking up shopping carts.
Shopping carts.
Yeah, and, to one extent, it could be a little bit annoying, I could see, with people because they are so friendly. They're like, hi, hey, they want to talk to you, and maybe they don't speak as well of English as you're used to. But you know that they're special needs. And, every single time I see them, I smile. And every single time my little daughter runs across them, she smiles. And often we'll go up and just give them a hug and shake their hand and spend a couple of minutes with them because that's all they want.
They always seem like they really want to be there.
Oh, my gosh.
They really want to help you individually.
My wife managed a restaurant for many years. My sons right now, they're teenage boys, and they work at a restaurant. And I asked them and talked with them about their coworkers. Now, I'm very proud of my boys. My boys work hard, and I know that the managers and owners love my boys. But I asked them about describing their coworkers, the teenagers that you typically see behind the counters in these restaurants. This is how they were described: lazy, unreliable, and not committed to their job. Every one of them feels like their job is beneath them. Now, think about that. Now, years ago, when
These
my
are
kids
teenagers in restaurants.
In a
what
restaurant.
Kinds of restaurants? Like a McDonald's?
It is. It's like that. Drive-through.
Wendy's, fast food,
it's
yes.
Fast food. They have a drive-through. It's a fast food place. Now, something that's really interesting, years ago when they were young, my kids were enthralled at the toys that McDonald's sold. So we would take them to McDonald's sometimes for a Happy Meal. We had a Down syndrome worker at a McDonald's that wasn't particularly close to my home. But you know what? The order was always right. He was always happy. We would go out of our way to go to that McDonald's for our boys because it was so often that he was the one greeting us at the window with a tremendous smile and always did such a phenomenal job. This gentleman, Tom, he just realized he could tap into a tremendous resource that he found that people are going to love. And thank him and bless him for doing this. And
it's
being
a simple
aware
task to scoop out that chocolate ice cream or whatever, I like Thin Mint or whatever is your passion or your poison, as they say. And they love doing it.
Yeah.
240,000 special needs in Texas. He's got a huge market. I think it's a great story.
It needs to go nationwide.
Maybe he needs a little help for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested, you can get with us on the radio show, thinkamericaradio.com. Let me move on. Does being asked to dress appropriately reflect America's, quote, systemic oppression? I know this is a wild one, guys. There's a Cornell University student that thinks that it does. Her name is Lolita Chai, and she chose, get this, to strip down to her underwear to deliver her trial senior thesis to the class to make a point. This as an act of outrage and defiance against her professor, who questioned whether the denim cutoff shorts that she was wearing at the time were just too short. So she sort of doubled down on the whole effect. So the professor proceeded to tell her in front of the class that she was inviting the male gaze away from the content of her presentation and onto her body. Well, that's not hard. That's as old as the dirt and twice as dusty. She said her definition of systemic oppression included being a woman and that she, quote, stood with people who have been asked to question themselves based on people's perception of their appearance. All right. When we come back, you two men are going to answer this question. You could consider her explanation legitimate, given our society is very crucial on how people look and dress, or you might think she's manufacturing this oppressive experience in order to become a victim and have that victim status. When we return, I teed it up pretty good for you. I'm Terry. Be right back.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
So, Chuck, systemic oppression. You got to get down to your skivvies to deliver a senior thesis. Well, what do you think?
First of all, this ain't the first time some gal took off their clothes to present something or make a statement. So as far as I'm concerned, A, it was a waste of time. But more importantly, the professor at this university is no more an idiot than so many others that are making situations like this even be an issue on campus. So she's wearing short pants, how long's that?
Shorts.
Short shorts. Back in the 80s, they were shorter than today. Anyhow, it's, to me, quite ridiculous as far as the conversation goes. As far as what she did, she's doing that to make a statement. That's what college kids do. The professor was a fool as far as I'm concerned in even bringing up the issue to begin with in order to present this opportunity for her to make this whole thing become an issue. And, what was her speech about?
Well,
no one knows.
No one knows because she, and this is part of her argument, basically she is angry, and this is her revolt, I guess, because she believes people are basing their perception of her on her appearance. Well, yes, they are. That's the whole point. Yes, they are. And that's exactly what you wanted when you did that. If you want to look like an intelligent college student that's ready for the working world, don't dress like you're ready for the bedroom.
Fully agree.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Our society is critical of how people look and dress. Yes, they are.
Not just our society, since the beginning of time.
Caveman.
I go to work and I have standards I have to maintain at the office. They're repressing me. No, that's ridiculous. So when we're talking and asking the question, is she really being repressed or is she trying to obtain victim status? She is working for victim status all week long and twice on Fat Tuesday, right? So this lady knows what she's doing. She even insinuated and brought up her race, as if there were an insinuation that her race and her femininity played a role in why he chose to make the comments that he made. Long ago, I was told by a manager at the place of work I was in at the time that I didn't look very good that day. I looked a little shoddy. My clothes were a little worn out. He wasn't really nice about it. Now, I was young, and I was making a good bit of money, but I didn't want to invest in my wardrobe. And it didn't offend me. It motivated me to change my behavior. What frustrates me here is I think what we're dealing with is an urchin, and nobody has told her no. And now she's getting to a place where she received what to me was good advice. And I'm quoting the students. They said, the professor said, what you wear and how you present yourself makes a statement.
Of course it does. And if she doesn't want that to be true, why doesn't she just go around in her birthday suit? And in Cornell, that's a problem because it's cold up there in New York. Look, if she wants to be taken seriously for the profession she wants to go in, she needs to dress with the norms of that profession. It's just a lot of angst. It's a lot of take on the man. I don't know what she got on her senior thesis, but it probably wasn't the best grade. I want to wrap up the show by giving you a little tip on football helmets. This is our Change Your Life Technologies segment. As we know, football is associated with concussions with football. And there's a lot of research that has been about this, and nobody wants the football, the game to just, turn back toward a rugby-style game. Everybody seems to like the padding and the helmets and the crunch. But according to investigations from Frontline, there have been nearly 200 concussions just this season alone. And those were the ones that were reported. So you can only imagine. Now, football isn't the only sport that has concussions, but it was probably argued the biggest sport that has concussions. So there is a company that has now received a grant. The company is Vicus, V-I-C-I-S. They went on to create a flexible helmet called 01. And apparently this helmet can reduce the chances of a player sustaining a concussion. They borrow from the automobile industry, which uses plastic bumpers and crumple zones as protective measures for decades. So they're using some of that technology and some of that plasticity in creating this new design. Multi-layered system that begins with a flexible outer shell and bendable plastic in the inner shell. And now the 01 helmet is being used by players on 18 NFL teams and about 20 college teams. That's good news for football lovers, particularly the players. That's it for this edition of Think America with Terry Gilberg. Want to thank Jim very much for your input. And thank you, Chuck. Keep recruiting for our good United States Air Force. We appreciate you both being on the program. Always remember, Think America, reason first.
Then converse.
And then converse. I'll see you next time.
Welcome to Think America with Terry Gilberg.
Well, here's a little thing from the rumor mill department. The buzz in Arizona is that the governor is now contemplating appointing Cindy McCain, the wife of Senator John McCain, to replace him as U.S. Senator when John dies. We'll talk about it on the program today. Plus, we are going to get into, again, the stand in the locker room or kneel or sit versus standing for the national anthem with the NFL. I think the decision with the NFL is a half measure. And we're back to this. It doesn't seem that the NFL has any spine on this issue. I'll talk with a business strategist and a turnaround guy about this latest decision with the NFL. And how very odd that liberal writer and Obama fan Maureen Dowd, the famous columnist with the New York Times, has kind of turned against Obama. We've got something to say about that as well. Welcome to Think America with Terry Gilberg. This is the town hall. I present thought-provoking conversation starters to folks that are non-broadcasters, real Americans. They come into the studio and they chew on the vexing and interesting topics du jour. So today we have Chuck. Chuck, my notes say you are a recruiter for the United States Air Force.
That's correct.
Terrific. You were in the Air Force?
I was, yes.
Oh, and now you recruit for them. Well, thank you for your service. What did you do?
I was a medic, and it was my pleasure.
Wonderful. I'm glad you're on the program. And Jim is a pianist for musical theater on the weekends. Otherwise, he's a specialist with taxes. Well, that's an interesting life.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks for being on the program. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
And it's nice to meet both of you. Let's get right to it. Walmart wants smart employees, college-educated ones, they say. And they say, well, they will subsidize their employees' tuition costs if, in fact, the employee goes to college. Now, I have seen this momentum before. McDonald's, they want their stores to be first entry-level job, and then you go to college. So if you're in high school and you need to make milkshakes, have a little pen money with you, come to McDonald's, flip burgers, etc. They're all about college. So I think some of these fast food and more big box retail stores like a Walmart, they're getting the message about college. All right. Part of it, too, is that Walmart is facing a very tight labor market and competition for the best talent is intensifying. That we kind of instantly see out there. Is it about time Walmart cared more for its employees with education? Or is it what I just said? There's a tight labor market, so therefore they're making a business move. They don't really care about the employees' education. It's all business for them. Sometimes when I go into Walmart, I say to myself, these people don't need to go to college. They just need to be a good cashier, a good greeter, a good stock boy that puts the tuna fish straight on the shelf and keeps everything dusted. Chuck, what are your views on this?
What do you think is actually taught in college? That's what is taught in college, how to be a good employee. It's not how to be...
some colleges, not a lot of the crazy college... Go ahead.
Well,
I don't want to get off on that tangent, but you know what I'm saying.
We could go down a whole different path at that rate. You're right. I think that the folks that run Walmart and McDonald's and the other organizations that are promoting this and pushing this are doing it for business purposes. It's part of their strategy to keep employees working, coming in and wanting to work from them, otherwise going out and becoming entrepreneurs on their own. And outside of that, you're right. There's no need for a person to go to college to learn how to flip a burger. I never went to college, quite frankly.
You didn't. But you were a medic in the United States Air Force.
Correct,
so
right.
You learned your skills, your collegiate skills through the United States Air Force, right?
Through the United States Air Force, that's correct. And also, once I got out of the United States...
But you did go to college from that respect.
I did not. I mean, I never was in college, but I still sutured people up that had wounds. I still stuck intubation tubes down people. I still, and I could go on and on and on as far as the medical field goes. I've also owned several businesses since I've gotten out of the Air Force. And none of that came from anything that I learned in college because, I didn't go to college.
College in the traditional sense, the University of,
right,
or state university,
right. Now, I have friends that are much more successful than I am that have college degrees, have gone through, gone to college and gone to universities. But I know just as many, if not actually many, many, many more that are totally broke who or still are in college at my age, for crying out loud, trying to figure out what they want to do when they grow up, kind of thing. So, college isn't the answer for an individual that wants to get ahead in life, but is it the answer for Walmart to keep the right kind of employee? Maybe. Who knows?
And maybe it's the answer for Walmart to keep a good PC face in the world. That's and marketing is everything. One could argue.
Terry, that's exactly what I see going on. I don't see Walmart trying to help their employees. Come on. I mean, this is a company that is just as famous for low prices on trash no one wants from China as they are for their employee lawsuits, right? It's the two things I think of with Walmart. I think of, their employees hate them, and they sell really cheap junk I don't want. So here's the thing. Yeah, there's a PR element to that, and we are in a tighter job market, right? So we have them who has, basically typically gone out and really treated their employees very poorly and still had people who needed jobs. And I think it is getting tighter, and I think they have had a lot of bad PR. I had a sister-in-law that worked for Walmart years ago. What was funny is she could never get them to schedule her properly. They have a scheduling system that is so erratic. She wanted to go to school and couldn't because their scheduling system was such a mess.
What division of Walmart did she work in? Was she a greeter,
worked at
cashier?
A jewelry counter. She worked in their little jewelry counter.
They do have that, yes.
Yeah, so... she could never get to school.
Was she part-time?
Nope, she worked full-time.
She
wanted to get to school.
I think scheduling with part-time people, to schedule a bunch of employees that are part-time is a nightmare. That's why I asked. But if she's full-time and they're basing some of the scheduling on the part-timers, she's probably being a little robbed of her full-time hours, too.
Well, she was really frustrated and had to quit and found something that was better so she could go to school. So, I don't think they're really being terribly thoughtful. I see this as a PR move.
You do. Well, I see it as a PR move, but I also see it as necessary because an educated person is always, on balance now, in general, this is a general statement, a better employee. Always. If you are more educated, on balance.
Totally disagree.
Now, how?
Because a truly educated individual will not be an employee for long because they'll be educated in the fact that if they're an employer, they're going to have a better life, in my experience. And that is what actually
But you can be a manager at Walmart. You can come up the tiers, and if you are educated, better educated, you have growth with this company.
In theory, quite frankly.
And I'm not talking just I'm not talking about Walmart specifically. I'm talking in general. If not, why in the world do we put any emphasis on any kind of education at all? Why are we just in America just not fat, dumb, and happy?
I think we actually are kind of fat, dumb, and happy here in America compared to most places in the world.
Why do you want to have continuing education? Why would you? Why would anybody want it?
Well, I'll tell you something. Walmart specifically does degrees in business and in supply chain management, which are things that would help them build a career at Walmart. So I can see that.
Or somewhere else, Sears and Roebuck, J.C. Penney, or other big Nordstrom's. You'll be a buyer, et cetera, Saks Fifth Avenue, Barney's, whatever.
Jim makes a good point. So just to chime in, if they are being sent to a college curriculum environment to learn how to do a specific task at Walmart, like I was taught to suture wounds or intubate a person who's not breathing, then that would be actually very, very meaningful. Sure, I'm down with that. If somebody was sent to a very specific college environment, college curriculum type scenario where they could learn business management.
And why? Because you believe that on balance, an educated person is better. It's better to be educated than non-educated.
Oh, well, yes, of course. It's definitely better. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is a currency.
All right, I've convinced you.
Knowledge is more important than is one of the most important currencies in this world.
All right.
And you only get that through education.
All right. So then we're going to have to talk about the curriculum. What kind of education? What is it that people are learning? Listen, I don't think that a college education in the traditional senses, at the university of or private schools or anything, is necessarily for everybody. I just don't believe that. But I do believe we need an educated populace. We need people that can walk and talk and chew gum, do math, know how to write, know how to read, are articulate human beings. And that goes for working at Walmart, working at McDonald's, working at these places that we might, poo-poo, it's not very intellectual crowd there. Well, no, they're not rocket scientists, but I would like to see the Walmart employee smarter. Personally, I go in there, I don't have a good time. A lot of times they don't know where things are. School also trains you. If you're going to be a good student, you got to be on time. You got to be organized. You've got to get that paper in. You've got a fair amount of stress to get the degree. People who are at that level of business don't work at Walmart because Walmart doesn't cater to that. What if they did?
Well, and there may be a better and higher level of employee now at Walmart, because you may find that we are able to attract into Walmart some people who want a degree, and that tuition assistance means they're at least going to be committed at a higher level to that job, and at least till they're through school. So I can see that it could be a beneficial thing for Walmart to do it. Certainly it's a beneficial thing to the individual employee who takes advantage of the program.
It certainly is true that there is a trend. I've noticed it a lot with McDonald's. In fact, I'll go one further. McDonald's now has ads that show all of the workers kind of taking five, and somebody comes in, presumably, if I remember the ad correctly, presumably a mid-manager, and says, okay, everybody gather around. He opens up the envelope, and everybody's kind of anticipating something, maybe bad or good. They don't know. And little Johnny just got a scholarship to go to college. Hooray! And Johnny knows that he got accepted somewhere, and McDonald's says hip, hip, hooray. And they're marketing that we are America's first job.
Great
That's good.
advertisement.
That's good marketing.
Starbucks has 60 different undergraduate degrees that they will pay for entirely. So, I mean, this is becoming more the norm.
Terry, let's get
and because of the internet, they can afford that.
Let's get a list of the people that work at Walmart that have degrees already. Let's get a list of the people that work at McDonald's that have degrees already. I'll bet you'd be surprised.
It's probably the board of directors.
Well, touche. Here I was giving them credit for getting their people to a higher level of business, and you say they're already at this so-called title, higher level of business. They still don't know anything.
Terry, do you know any people
but
with
But that's because they're trying to address it now, because they know that. So maybe they went to XYZ State University and didn't learn anything. That's on that XYZ State University. All right, a good, robust discussion, guys, to kick off this edition of Think America. Straight ahead, the rumor mill and the buzz in Arizona. Could it be soon saying something like Senator Cindy McCain? Ooh, what's that all about? When we return.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
Did you know out there in Arizona, the buzz is that the governor is contemplating appointing Cindy McCain to replace John McCain as U.S. Senator once he passes. This is not just rumor. There's been some national news on this. Of course, nothing official yet that I've been told. It may sound pretty odd, but there is precedent for it. When Senator McCain passes, the job of the U.S. Senator of Arizona may fall to his wife if the governor says it's going to be hers until there will be a new gubernatorial election. So my response on this is, well, that had to come from John McCain to try to maybe legislate from the grave through his wife. One could also argue, why not his daughter? And there's the other element, and I'll go to you first on this, Jim. McCain doesn't like Trump. I don't know her well, but from what I read in the press, Cindy McCain doesn't like Trump either, if not more so than her husband.
Yeah.
So how do you see it? John McCain calling the shot.
John McCain has been, to say the least, a contrarian to the Trump agenda. And so I would expect that if that seat were given to her, she would follow suit. Now, I think this would be really bad for Governor Ducey in the state of Arizona, because he is a Republican, and he being John McCain is not very...
He's a maverick.
He's not popular.
He's not a Republican. He's a maverick.
Well, the Democrats in the state of Arizona like him a lot more than the Republicans. And so if they expect that Cindy is going to come in and basically play that same role, there's going to be some blame onto that Governor Ducey in Arizona.
Do you agree?
I do actually agree with Jim. I mean, all night long he's been saying some really good stuff that I can't debate otherwise. Fact of the matter is that this has nothing to do with Trump. Okay, would Cindy McCain be a good senator to replace John McCain as far as any other person goes? Well, of course he would, or she would rather, because she's been married to him and with him the entire time that he's been a senator. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Are you right wing, left wing? In the middle? That's irrelevant. Fact of the matter is that John McCain has a lot of people that have been beside him over the years that know all the agendas that he has had and all the thoughts and the ideas that he's had that's helped him do the things that he's done in the Senate. And any number of people could replace him once he gets called home. Is Cindy the best candidate?
Well, she knows his policies, but who made her a stateswoman?
Well, nobody has made her a stateswoman.
The only thing is there is some precedent for it, and he didn't die. He's still living as of this moment before May 31st, which meant in Arizona, I looked this up, if you were going to run and gather signatures and raise some money, all those signatures had to be in by May 31st so your name could appear on an August primary ballot. In Arizona, their primary is in August.
Okay.
And so for those that were thinking that he would have passed on and there would have been time to gather signatures, that didn't happen. So now that we're already in June, we're in that period now where when and if he passes, it's time for a replacement. So my guess is that he got to the governor of Arizona and said, hey, this is what I want. And maybe there's money involved, like, I don't know, PAC money.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping this is just speculation, because if this is some kind of political payback, there's a reason for it. So if this ends up happening...
Why do you want it speculation when we probably are all in this room cynical enough to say it's political?
It's political. But if this ends up happening, and we don't know yet, because it hasn't happened yet, but if this rumor is true and it ends up being given to her, it is going to be because Senator McCain has opposed the Trump agenda, and something's coming up they're hoping to get from it, because I can't see her possibly winning that seat in an election. Wouldn't it make sense to a Republican governor to give that seat to someone who could go out and win the votes to keep it?
It also makes sense to me that the Republican governor can use a little McCain PAC money, because the Republican governor hasn't acted so Republican out there in the wild, wild west.
You're right.
With regard to the teachers.
Oh, yeah, his
a lot of
capitulation.
Republicans are very upset in Arizona about the fact that even the teachers had the opportunity to strike, that he didn't, honcho that whole thing.
Or call him on the carpet.
And call him on the carpet.
Was illegal.
The strike was illegal. He made that very messy. And they did get a 20%, but he didn't know where the money was coming from. He was weak. And now if he wants to run again with a little old John McCain PAC money, that certainly helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it's a money issue, that's absolutely understandable and acceptable. If you read the article, all the article really actually talks about those that they got together. And so it's all speculation of whether or not there was a conversation about Cindy becoming the next senator once John passed.
It's out there. It is so out there. So these hawkish political reporters, they're not dumb.
No, sure. And at the end of the day, what you were just saying, though, is going to be the case come John's, again, passing and called home, hopefully. Where's the money coming from?
Where is the money to keep the Republican governor in office?
Right.
He needs that, because without that money, and with a lot of Republicans upset about this whole teacher thing, the teachers union, and how it was an agenda from a lot of socialists from California coming into Arizona. I don't know too much about it, but it was botched. It was really handled poorly. And if he wants to be the governor again, he's got to get that Republican vote, and money will help. Yep. TV ads and so forth.
This capitulation gave a lot of power and authority to the people who run that Red for Ed movement, and now it's been taken over by the liberal agenda.
And that never had to happen. Nope. Straight ahead, more talk about the fallout from the latest decision with the NFL. Some players will stay in the locker room, some will come out. We'll talk with a business strategist. I'm Terry. You can find all of our shows at thinkamericaradio.com.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
All right, just when you think the NFL's take a knee, stand up, whatever, the soldier versus the player has been talked to death, the NFL came up with a new solution to the problem, and I think it's a half measure. Some NFL players will now stay in the locker room during the National Anthem and will come out and take a stand after the anthem is and get ready to play the game. So how will all this play out with regard to the business of the NFL? Andrew Loudon is with us. He's a business strategist, a turnaround expert. Andrew, welcome to the program. Nice to have you on Think America with Terry Gilbert. Hello.
It's a great honor to be here, Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. So let's get right to it. It just seems to me, and I want to review the bidding just for a little bit. Back when this started to become an issue, I thought it was just a complete no-brainer. If you sign a contract and that contract says you play ball to the best of your ability, and before you play ball, for the 2 minutes before you get on the field or you sit and wait to go on the field, you got to stand up. Your helmet is in your right hand or in your left hand, your right hand over the heart. You stand just silent for the national anthem. You're in your uniform. You can't digress from any of that. It's part of your contract. It's employment law. But somehow it became this cacophony of voices that were just talking, no, it's patriotic, it's my First Amendment, Black Lives Matter, no, it doesn't matter. All of a sudden, it wasn't the discussion anymore about employment law. If it's in the contract, it's in your contract. So then it got into the next chapter about, wait a minute, if it's your First Amendment right, that's against the government. You can't take all your activism into the workplace. I can't take my personal activism into the workplace. So this got all bollocksed up, in my opinion. And then it was like, well, the soldiers out there doing it for the country and those spoiled football players, they can't even stand for 2 minutes. Andrew, why did we get off track on all of this?
There really is so much to unpack here. I think a lot of it stems from, first and foremost, I think there's just a lot of vagueness behind those very policies that you're talking about. In the everyday world, if we are insubordinate, if we don't follow the dress code, if we show up late to the office,
right.
Those are all very fireable offenses. We have consequences to things that we don't abide by that are stipulated in our employment agreements. When you take a look at an NFL player's contract, it seems a bit vague. They talk a lot about how players must conduct themselves on and off the field with appropriate recognition of the fact that the success of professional football depends largely on public respect for and approval of those associated with the game. I'm stating that directly off of a legal review here, talking about the NFL player's contract.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? That right there is an awfully vague way to say that if your protest offends the public, then you may very well be in breach. There's also language in there that if a player is engaged in personal conduct reasonably judged by the club to adversely affect or reflect on the club, they can be fired as well. However, it's just not as clear as being that black and white. There's still room for interpretation.
Well, then that's on the NFL. And that's on them,
right.
And thus the door, floodgates, if you will, is open to all this controversy. So I think the Roger Goodells and the brainiacs behind him, I think there were two sides whispering in both ears, and he became weak. He didn't put his foot down. I remember when there was early on the socks that were being worn, not part of the uniform, and it was depicting cops as pigs. And yet the cops that were ambushed in Dallas, the Dallas Cowboy team, couldn't have even a ribbon, insignia on their uniform. So Goodell he wasn't definitive. He was squishy about it. And then it became this whole thing about my First Amendment right and I'm more patriotic if I take a knee. The whole thing is nutty. I mean, it's spun out of control. And here's my next question to you as a business strategist. The fans are sick of it. Am I wrong?
You know what? I think you're partially wrong. I think this is obviously very polarizing. It's very political. The world we live in today is very divided. There are definitely a lot of fans that are very upset by this. Yet there's still, there are some that are pleased by the action that's been taken by the NFL. I think it really will just be a matter of time. The first week of the NFL will likely be one of the most interesting weeks ever in terms of what those ratings come back as at the end of the week.
All right, so
just to see how viewership falls off.
Well, sure, and it has diminished. This we know. And maybe in this decision that if you want to be in the locker room, You can be in the locker room, but mark my words, the guys that come out having taken their right not to stand for the anthem, and they're in the tunnel or they're in the locker room and they're late to the game I don't mean kickoff. I mean they're late to the field for the game. They run the risk of being booed by that audience and found out and outed, if you will. And that goes back to the wallet, that goes back to free enterprise, that goes back to the business strategy of having this be a half measure, in my humble opinion. Your thoughts?
No, that's right. And you know what? What's interesting, if you really analyze this, what the NFL has done is really given players the option. And ultimately what that means then is they're also giving that power back to the team. So now teams are going to have these conversations internally and make the decision. You're likely going to see those decisions saying, hey, we want the entire team in the locker room, or we want the entire team on the field, or it may just continue to be divided and you'll see a split there. But essentially what the NFL did was they deferred. They said, hey, you guys decide, you guys handle this. And you're right. I think it's created even more complexity to this. Like, it's interesting you mentioned the sock issue with the pigs that Colin Kaepernick was wearing.
Right.
The irony behind all this is that the NFL has one of the strictest uniform policies on the planet, frankly, and so they can easily enforce that. But their vagueness in their language and their lack of decision in enforcing this this national anthem policy is a bit laughable when you look at how strict that uniform policy is. And really, just by comparison, if you look at what the NBA has done, they are very much point blank in their language, saying that all players, coaches, trainers, they need to line up in a dignified posture, and so they can still fall back on that very strict guidance. And the NFL, unfortunately, just doesn't have that. And
with the NBA, now that the NFL has run with the ball on this issue, the NBA can say, okay, we're going to chance it too. What would happen? Do you really think these hotshot players would be fired, Andrew?
Here's my thought. I really don't think so, and here's why. In the world you and I live in, I think many of us are very easily replaceable, right? In the world of the NBA, in the world of the NFL, I mean, these are superstars with elite talent that, they're the best in the world of what they do.
And they're not so easily replaced, right?
No, they're not. And so they hold a lot of power over the owners and their wallets as well. I mean, can you imagine if players like Tom Brady or LeBron James took polarizing stances here? I mean, there's no way you can fire those guys. Those are the faces of their respective leagues. And so, then that creates even more vagueness.
Well, it is an interesting question because, yes, we're the plebes. We can be let go. But even with elite players, there is another elite player sitting, waiting to be even more elite. So you raise a really interesting point, and I suppose it would depend on what game we're talking about. Look at the Olympics. I mean, you make the Olympics, but there's always those fill-in athletes that are there, ready to go. So are they replaceable? Well, I suppose, yes, they are. Is it easy to replace them? No, I don't suppose that's true.
Right.
What is your before we run out of time here, Andrew, what's your particular take on this half measure? Quickly, we got 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's a bit disappointing. I think they likely should have taken a stronger stance here. I think really it just continues to be a divided issue. I don't think they took the time to hear the viewpoint of the players and come up with a solution that would involve them. Early in the business world, when you try to come up with a decision that's going to really change and impact the organization so greatly, you want the feedback of the employees so they can be bought in and they can be the voices that are pushing this change forward in a positive manner. So I certainly think they could have done better in all of this. I'm with you. Andrew Loudon, thank you very much for your insight and your expertise on this, business strategist and turnaround expert. My pleasure. Thank you. You bet. When we return, why Maureen Dowd has seemingly turned on President Obama. Will wonders never cease? You're listening to Think America, Reason First, Then Converse with Terry Gilberg.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
Lots to be said about the NFL. I'm sticking with it, guys. I just think this decision isn't a decision. It's if you want to be in the locker room, fine, and then come out. The otherwise stand and salute the flag with our national anthem. I think the guys that are going to hang out and then come to the field tardy are going to get booed because the onus on them being out there to not be booed is to be out there for the anthem. So those who are late, the ones that appreciate them being late, won't boo them. The ones that don't will, and that will go for them being outed, player this, player that, and they will be known in the press. We'll see. We'll see.
I'm going to be booing louder than anybody.
Are you an NFL fan?
I am. And this infuriates me. You know, there's a there's a very famous punk song that says, if you think you live in a free country, try walking into the deli and urinating on the cheese. Meaning to say, in other words, there are things that even in free countries you just don't do. Now,
I've never heard that one, but thanks for getting me plugged in on that.
It's a beautiful visual. The concept being, we live in a country that, yes, we have our agency and we are given this wonderful free speech, and you've chosen to use your free speech to disrespect
to pee
our
on the
flag
cheese
and
Don't
our country.
Pee on the cheese.
I'd rather they peed on the cheese. You know, when that national anthem plays and that flag gets lit up, I am reminded of those who died. I am reminded of those who paid the price for the freedoms we have. When we take that time in a moment of near reverence to be respectful and thankful for the things we've been provided and the opportunities we're given. So when you take that time to exercise your free right to take a knee, you are urinating on it. I am furious at it. These guys who choose to take a kneel because they have issues, I want to give them a tissue and just rip their head off.
And you know what? Maybe their issue is so near and dear to them that they're moved to do this. But I would say to them, that's not the only issue the flag represents. It represents all kinds of issues.
Yeah,
and when you do that, it's your particular activist. What about the activists from some other, what about education? What about immigration? All of these issues. It's not just the issue of Black Lives Matter. The flag represents all of it, you know, and some would say warts and all, but nonetheless.
It brings us together.
Yeah, exactly. But it bothers me that this is a single issue. You know,
Me
that's
too.
that the flag is, you know, all of our history. It represents all of that. But I'll let Chuck in.
You know, these spoiled punks do need to get educated, because just like what you said, what are you trying to prove by what you're doing in regards to the standing or not standing for the national anthem? What does that have to do with cops in this country, for crying out loud? Nothing. And you know what? The amount of money that these guys make, if they really want to do something, get off of their knees and go do something with their money to change the problems that they're having, but don't do it out on the playing field. Now, let me tell you real quickly.
They've taken the activism into the workplace. I can't take my activism into my workplace.
I know. That in itself is flat out wrong. Why they're being allowed to do that is beyond me. Absolutely beyond me. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care if they're the greatest in the world. They should be fired. Boom. Out. Serious. Done deal. I don't care if you're Tom Brady, you know.
Not replaceable or replaceable.
Oh, totally replaceable. Are you kidding me? So you might not get another Tom Brady. You're going to get a Brett Favre. I don't know. Use whatever name you want. But you're going to get somebody that will stand up for the flag and still put on a good game. Now, here's the thing. When this first came out, man, I was like, oh, I'm not watching football. These guys suck. They're yada, yada, yada. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like, well, I really miss my football games on Sundays. So I started watching football again. You know what? But I was watching for the ones that, you know, that I could tell stood and didn't stood. And I actually was watching for the, you know, if they made a foul. And, you know, that's not the way that I want to watch football. I just want to see a good game. And these guys are out here and they're getting paid to play a good game for us, not to make a political statement or a personal issue statement, which they have the money to go out and actually make a change with in the world, other than making some stupid
we'll see where it
statement or
goes
wearing
from
weird
now.
socks.
I say they're going to be outed. They are going to be booed. And the NFL still has the problem on their hands, and it will affect tickets. And that goes to bottom line profits. It will shake out. The fans will puppeteer this because it goes to the wallet. Let's take a look at Maureen Dowd. Switching gears, the liberal writer for the New York Times, she doesn't appear to be an Obama fan anymore. Why? When we return.
Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert.
I thought it was quite odd when I read a New York Times columnist, Maureen O'Dowd, and her take on Obama. She has come, believe it or not, to realize that Obama is just too hip for the people, too much of a visionary, too forward-thinking, too progressive. She basically lays out that the people bought his shtick during the first term, but then he backed Hillary, who had no economic plan, who was riddled with ethical issues, and who was a lazy campaigner. And why he did this? Well, who knows? But he shouldn't have done it, according to Maureen Dowd. What was surprising about all of this is all of a sudden now she's got thumbs down on Obama, that he appeared to be so smart and so ahead of the game and then made this stupid move with Hillary. He should have backed Joe Biden. So how smart was he really?
This is really frustrating to me to have read this article because I saw her talking out both sides of her mouth. You know, I saw somebody who's like pointing out kind of the bad things that she saw in both the Obama administration and the Hillary campaign. And at the same time, and I quote, "We just weren't ready for his amazing awesomeness," in speaking about Obama. So in an offhand way, she's trying to like promote him. Like, we just weren't ready as a country for how amazing this guy really was. So, you know what I thought was really also frustrating about this was this is somebody that lied to us the entire time throughout his presidency. And she points some of these things out, but she's doing it in this way in discussing that Trump is dismantling the Obama legacy.
Right. And he is.
Well, of course. The legacy was a pile of feces that we had to do something with. What were we going to do with health care? Keep it going? Are we going to continue to lie that it's free health care when there's nothing that's free? Somebody has to pay that bill. And we watched our national
North
debt
Korea, Iran, the economy, jobs, and on it goes.
He was the worst president in history for foreign policy.
But, you know, Obama, this column started because Obama himself would look at Ben Rhodes, one of his advisors, and basically say, I'm paraphrasing, maybe they just didn't see what we were trying to do. Maybe we were just wrong because the people didn't come along very readily. Maybe the people were kind of dumb, stuck in the muds. They just didn't have it in them to see where we were going. Chuck.
Well, nobody's as smart as a liberal. You know that, right? I mean, Savage said it best, liberalism is a mental disorder, and she is a perfect example of a liberal with mental disorders. Obama is simply an experiment, as we all know, that went the way that it went and is finally getting corrected. Thank God for our democracy. Thank goodness for the American people to come back around and actually bring our country and our economy and our everything that America stands for back to what it was when we first began America.
Hopefully.
No, he's doing every bit of it. But the idea behind this gal and the information in the column and the article that I read is just nothing more than just liberal. She's
disappointed that the people didn't come along with Obama.
Oh,
She's
boy.
disappointed and Obama is disappointed. She's also disappointed that he hitched his wagon to the Hillary train rather than Joe Biden. And so I'm
They're
surprised.
Sore losers.
I'm surprised Maureen Dowd actually even wrote this because she was such a fan. And now she's come to her senses and said, well, basically, you know, he's too godlike. People didn't understand him. And then all of a sudden, second term, he wasn't so godlike. He made a major mistake with Hillary. Let's finish up the show with Change Your Life Technology segment, technology that changes millions of people's lives for the better. There's an artificial iris I want to tell you about. Food and Drug Administration has approved this new iris replacement device. It's surgically implanted into the individual's eye. It's called Custom Flex Artificial Iris, and it's created by clinical research consultants. Two primary uses for it include simply changing your eye color and repairing obvious eye damage. And by the way, obvious eye damage means vision-related issues that are caused by birth defects, traumatic injury, even melanomas that can affect the iris and its function. You can learn more about this on thinkamericaradio.com. It is under our Change Your Life Technology segment on the website, The Artificial Iris. That's it for this edition of Think America with Terry Gilbert. I want to thank Jim for being on the program and all your astute points. In fact, that last one, very clever. So I hope that you had a good time on the program. Chuck, you too. Keep fighting the good fight for our U.S. Air Force recruits. I appreciate you as well and all of your insight and comments. Yeah, again, you can find us thinkamericaradio.com. And remember, reason first.
And then converse.
And then converse. We'll see you next time.